Hello, creepies and crawlies, and welcome back to another wonderful, charming, fun, eventful, maybe kind of, oh God, we're so tired, episode of Ice Cream Queens. And let's go ahead and bring in Magda because tonight, I
Hello,
think,
love.
hello, I think it's just going to be you and I this evening.
Uh,
But honestly, it's a topic that we are very, very used to, and we are
mm,
very, it's kind of near and dear to us. So,
Very much so.
yeah. So before we get rolling, I would like to just kind of ask you, had anything interesting going on this past weekend? Fun to
Just
share?
being busy, so doing the domestic sort of thing, and aye, that's it. It's just exhausting. This weekend's just been exhausting. So I'm a bit meh today, a bit out of it. I mean, as we said, we both laughed at the fact we're in pajamas today. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I'm in my nice soft bamboo pajamas, and I just couldn't be bothered. I mean, look, I actually put on makeup, so there's that.
That's good. I
My hair's a
attempted.
mess.
I attempted. Yesterday, I actually spent the last couple of days in Selmer, Tennessee. But yesterday specifically, I was at the Rockabilly Highway Revival.
Oh,
Where,
lovely.
oh yeah, it was a lot of fun, but it got to be very hot very quickly. Our friends from Huff Studio in McNair County actually host this event. It's 15 years running, and I was able to perform there. But we also introduced the very first pinup pageant that they have had, and that was a lot of fun. So if I look a
Oh,
little drained, if I'm like kind of glazed over at some point, it's
mm,
just been a long weekend, but very well worth it. A lot of fun.
fabulous.
Yeah,
I wish I'd been
yeah.
half so fun my weekend, but no, as accomplished. I got a lot done, so there's that. I can feel yay about that.
Sometimes that's just the best thing to do is just go
Mm,
yay. I got some
yeah,
things done and
I
I'm
just
good.
mm,
So I'm kind of excited that it's you and I talking about this. Not that Lauren does not have her very own lovely story when it comes to goth love and everything like that.
aye.
But it's just something I think that you and I kind of grew up in the middle of, and have always kind of equated the
Mm-hmm.
nature of our relationship to the name of the show is The Dark Lovers that
Aye.
shaped goth romance. And I think that your relationship and my relationship kind of stand the test of time, are pretty much the epitome we have drawn from those different types of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, um, so tell me, first of all, obviously I see you and I know you and I know a little bit about your history and your husband and everything. So, who would you say was the biggest influence in the way that you two view one another?
Actually, this is going to sound so sappy, but my parents, I had
Oh,
two ridiculously in love parents. My entire family refer to them as the eternal newlyweds. And very much like my beloved and myself, my mum was always very gothy. Her favorite colors are black and dark purples and lovely blues and such. And she has jet black hair and eyes so dark brown that they're practically black, and very pale skin. And you know, I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, so there's castles and wide open moors, and my mum also is the one that taught me how to sew. So she's a seamstress as well.
yes.
And she made the most lovely clothing for all of us, including herself. And this is the 70s, so the long, sort of flowy things were in fashion. So she made a lot of that. So I actually have pictures of my mum windswept walking through the moors looking like a beautiful
Oh,
Gothic queen.
and
So,
you're like, thanks for moving me away, Mom. Let me have my moment.
but she was so lovely and old school Gothic, more into the romantic Goth and sort of the lovely Victorian sort of beauty. And my parents were so desperately, passionately in love with each other. They worshipped the ground that each other walked on. My father was always more the traditional sort, he looked a bit more preppy and, tall and very clean cut, very well spoken with an extremely deep bass voice. And I watched them, and they were so beautiful. And when I saw, say, the Adams family, See
Oh,
Gomez and Morticia, watching them together reminded me of my parents. They were silly and over the top and passionate about each other. And I thought, that's the most beautiful and healthy relationship I've ever seen. That's what I want. And that's how they were. I come from a very weird family. So I could associate with the Adams family very well because that's my family right there. Weirdos who tend to like the dark and the creepy, but are happy about it, not depressed, not dark and dreary, just delighted at all the weirdness in the world. And my father being in medicine as well, I saw a lot of the creepier side of things that most people shy away from. Surgeries and skeletons and medicines, and I just saw it and it was normalized, and it made everything seem a bit more magical.
my parents were actually kind of almost the opposite of that. I don't want to say that weren't really romantic, but they were
Mm,
extremely family oriented,
mm.
but not to the poster child of this is what the American family should look like, the
Uh-huh.
idyllic family should look like. My family had its ups and downs, and it definitely had its moments, but I, I I think realistically, if you were to compare my family to any of the I get great gothic love stories. I'm thinking that probably Herman Munster and Lily would probably be a little bit closer.
But I like
Um,
that.
well, I mean, because if you think about
I
Herman, yeah. So if you think about Herman, although also I look at this and I see Daryl in myself a little bit in that as well. But when you think about Herman Munster, Herman was the I need to go to work and I need to be the perfect
right.
family and I need to set this ideal example. And Lily was always trying to be the perfect housewife, the perfect person, and their oddness. Although they didn't realize that they were strange,
No,
they thought that
they
they were
seem so
normal.
normal.
Yes.
Exactly. Seem so perfectly, beautifully a family. They're
Yeah,
just a
oh,
very normal family. That's what I loved about them. They were so bouncy and happy about everything, and very open and friendly. I loved that about them.
one of the things that I think is very interesting when you start looking at these characters, such as because I'm from the era that I originally started watching the original Adams Family with
Hmm.
Carolyn Jones and John Aston, but
Hmm.
also the Munsters, and those are the dark and creepy type families and the
Hmm.
Gothic families that I grew up with. I'm sure there were others that I probably gravitated to, but those were the one. Generally, I would lean more towards the horror esque type things,
Mm.
but those were the ones that I remember just really standing out and saying this is the type of romance and the type of love and connection that I want.
Mm.
Why, as young kids, because I mean although we were kind of introduced to goth type things and to darker
Mhm.
concepts at an earlier age, depending on where you were and what your family was like. Why do you think that those two particular families drew our attention?
Well, if you look at a lot of um, the various shows, most of them are not healthy.
Oh no.
You look at them and they don't like each other. So many of like the sitcoms and such spend so much of their time unhappy with the other or trying to hide things from the other, distressed about having to deal with the other. But oddly, in the weirdo shows, that's not like that at all. They spend all of their time trying to be kind and understanding and as affectionate and as inclusive as they possibly can. They're so delighted to be with their partner, and all they can think about is making their partner happy and comfortable and feel loved. I mean, look at the way the monsters, they spend all of their time trying to make life better for their family and for their spouse. They're desperately in love with their spouse, both,
Mhm.
either direction. And the same with the Adams family. I think what drew me was seeing a healthy relationship. They were so happy to be together. When you look at, as I said, so many of the other just, your standard normal family sort of sitcoms, the entire show revolved around the conflict between the wife and the husband, the partners. But that's exact opposite of what these were about. Their conflict had to do with the life outside their family, mixing
Absolutely.
in with their perfect little world. And yeah, I think that alone was enough to make you say, well, That's what I want right there.
I think it's safe to say, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that they were inclusive, because when you think about the family dynamic, especially in this day and age, you don't see a lot of families that are multifamily, generational, living within the same house.
Mm-hmm.
The whole concept that, you know, mother doesn't live with you, father doesn't live with you, you all have your own home, you all have your own space, and your children separate and go out. And although there's an element of me that I'm like, okay, I've seen it work good in both type of environments, but I think there's an element of missing that connection to
Mm.
family, and that was something that you saw with both the Munsters
Aye.
and Adam's family, where Mama was living in the house, where Uncle Fester was living in the house, but you also had Grandpa in the house. So cousin Marilyn came to live with them, and it was just another member of the family who um, they I don't necessarily think that I could say that they were a burden, because they always seemed to pull their
Oh
share. They were there
no.
helping out and trying to make the family to even better.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing that I liked about them myself personally, because coming from a European background, that's much more common overseas to see generational households. That's not
Mhm.
weird over there. That's the norm over there. And it was for me as well. I had several of my mum's siblings live with us various times, my aunts and uncles that lived with us, and cousins as well. My grandmother, she lived with us for a while, my grandfather as well. So all of them actually on both sides at one point in time lived with us. And I've always been in a multi-generational household. I think no, with my own family is the first time that I've not been. But so it didn't seem weird to me. It felt homey. It felt
Yeah,
normal. It felt happy and so supportive. I think I like that as well.
I could see where that would definitely be an asset growing up in that type of environment. But I could also see, if you are a grown woman with children. My oldest daughter just recently went through this and was living in a space with her mother-in-law, and it became a bit of a headbutting session. And
Eh,
there comes a time where I think you have um, generational gaps where you are sitting there, and the children don't know. Oh, wait, this is
mm,
my daddy's mother. Does that override mom? Does, or
uh,
they start playing one another off of each other. So speaking of like the Adams family and the Munsters, we have so many different variations. For instance, with the Adams family, we have the original version or not the original version. We have the comic version, which is the original, but we have
mm-hmm,
the 60s version with Carolyn Jones and John
mm,
Aston. We have the 90s version with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. Whew, almost went down.
mm.
Although Angelina Jolie might be a great Morticia. And then now we have this newer version with, and I completely lost their names. Catherine Zeta-Jones
Aye,
and
Louise Guzman.
thank you, Louise
Guzman.
Guzman.
I think
And
it's fantastic.
so out of let's just look at the Adams family to begin
Mm-hmm.
with, and we're going to jump over and do this kind of the same thing with the Munsters. Is there a version of those families that you like better than the other?
I have to say, my favorite Gomez will always be Raul Julia. He's
Mm-hmm.
just,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the epitome of romance and passion and insanity all wrapped together. And he doesn't have to be a Ken doll. He doesn't have to be this, Adonis-looking individual. But you look at him and you just see sensuality and you see poetry in his soul. You can feel his desire for Morticia every time he so much as glances her way. And I think that they played it beautifully together. And I think the two of them had a delicious chemistry because her
Absolutely.
Morticia was so much more sedate and controlled, but you could just see any moment now she could slice her head off if you moved the wrong way. I love the fact that she felt like such a black widow, and the fact that that just made Gomez all the more attracted to her. Her danger, her just delight, just the utter delight that they felt in each other. And I have to say, the other thing I liked about it is it had a bit more, well, kick, to be brutally honest.
Oh
There's
yes.
there's just this delicious undercurrent that shows that they are freaks in every sense possible, which also attracted me. I thought that was lovely. And they were dark, true, much like the original drawn comic strips, but a bit more joyful. Not kitschy exactly, but perhaps a little bit. And I liked that, just the perfect amount of camp, not too much, not enough that you just thought, oh god, this is terrible, but it was like, no, that's nice. I like that. So they've got to be my favorite. What about you?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I think first of all, the fact that you were able to introduce very subdued but sexual overtones into the nature of those movies without overdoing it,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of their relationships made sex normal.
Mm-hmm.
It wanted to normalize that type of relationship, and I think that when you were looking at the original television version with Carolyn Jones and John Astin, they were constantly getting in trouble because I do believe that um, I, it, I might be wrong on this. It was either Fred Flintstone and Wilma or Morticia and Gomez were one of the first couples to share a bed
Ah.
in a bedroom. So, but there were a lot of things where he got a lot of pushback. She got a lot of pushback on the original show because they were people were coming. It's like keep your hands off of her and all this, and it's like that
No,
is not. I'm like,
that's the antithesis. That's just like the opposite of what they are. One of my favorite quotes from the 60s television show was
mhm.
as they're walking through the house and Morticia turns to Gomez and says, darling, I have a lovely idea. Let's go into the playroom and read. And he says, oh, I have a better idea. Let's go in the playroom and play.
But when you think it was the 1960s, this
Mm-hmm.
was televised. This was actually
Mm-hmm.
not just televised. This was after school television. This was like
Aye.
3 o'clock in the
Mm-hmm.
afternoon. So some of the little things that they were able to get away with were very risque considering the time slot.
Oh, they were
Um,
constantly on each other. They were running their hands over each other and embracing each other. And I mean, Carolyn Jones' dress
mm.
alone is amazing. They got away with that. It was a
Oh
second
yes.
skin.
Yes.
So beautiful.
And she was amazing. Absolutely
Mm,
amazing in that part. Um,
mm.
Now, one thing I will say it with the Raul Julia and the Angelica Houston, and as sad as I was that they never did proceed and do another version, in a roundabout way, I think there were a lot of people hoping that when Wednesday came out, that you were going to see maybe Christina Ricci pick up the helm, and it was going to be
I,
her daughter or something, or
mhm.
Wednesday's daughter or something. But Angelica Houston came out and basically said that after Raul Julia passed, she would never play that role again because her Gomez had passed.
I,
And that just breaks, and to me, first of all, it breaks my heart. It is so sad, but it is such a Morticia and Gomez
it is.
connection. Yeah, it is. It is so Morticia and Gomez. It was beautifully stated, wonderfully done. And I kind of have to give her props for that because no, if you're Morticia, nobody is going to
Mm-mm.
replace your Gomez.
Exactly. There. That's it. That's the love of your life. That's your heart. That's the other half of your soul. And
Mhm.
when they're gone, you can't replace them. You just can't. I mean, that's another thing that's sad and lovely about my parents was my father passed almost 10 years ago now, very suddenly.
Oh,
And it's utterly crushed my mum, just crushed her. That's one of the reasons why I made a special quilt specifically for her, a pixel portrait of my father. Um, my father was 6'6", and my mum is barely 5 feet tall. So seeing them next to each other was almost comical but adorable. And when I made the quilt for my mum, I specifically wanted to make it as large as was humanly possible because I love the idea of him towering over her even in quilt form.
that's okay.
And the fact that once my mum had it, she could wrap herself in it and literally have a cuddle with daddy. So
Oh, that's so sweet. By the way, I showed my mother, who is a quilter and a seamstress, and she actually, due to back injuries and different being older now. She just can't do the
Mm,
things that she used to
that's
do.
exhausting.
I was showing her that quilt, and she just sat there and stared at it for a few minutes. She's like, "That's a quilt?" I'm like, "Yes, that's a quilt." And then I showed her the photograph, and she's like, "That man could have been a movie star." So I just want to let that was her
No.
response. So
Yes, my father was a very handsome man, and my mother, actually, amusingly enough, the person that she got compared to more often than not was I can't think of the actress's name. She played Gidget under the Flying
Sally
Nun.
Field.
Aye,
Was,
my mum got compared to her all the time when she was younger.
how funny.
So
Um,
I,
I would love to see a photo of your mom younger.
I will share one with you. It's there's a special one, extra special, that screams Gidget.
So I know that a lot of people, when we said that we were going to talk about the Dark Lovers, we knew that we were going to touch on Gomez and Morticia. We knew that we were going to touch on Lovely and Herman.
Aye.
And we're going to circle back around and maybe talk a little bit more about the newer versions of them. But some of the other characters that I wanted to kind of discuss is you also have Jack and Sally.
Aye.
And Jack and Sally has become this idealistic
Mm-hmm.
portrayal of what love should be. Um, and I would say that is more of a younger generation,
Aye.
probably. What is it about their relationship do you feel that people gravitate to?
I don't know. I have to admit that I loved it when it first came out. I
Mhm,
had, this will date me a bit. I literally just graduated from high school, secondary school,
mhm.
and went to go see it in the theater. And I had actually bought the soundtrack before seeing the movie, so I knew all the songs before I actually went in to see it, because I happen to love Danny Elfman. He's one of my favorites. And there's just, it's so magical fairy tale. It has that feeling, that standard unrequited love that becomes requited. So
Mhm.
I think it's that desire, that longing, that looking at someone and thinking, that's what I want, and actually getting it. I think that's probably what makes it so drawing for people and so romantic, is that moment, that magical moment at the very end of the film, where they're standing on that beautiful, crazy, curved cliff that they're on, and he suddenly looks and he actually sees her, really sees her for the first time in the entire story, and
Yes.
says it, there you are. Have you been standing there the whole time and I didn't even notice it was you? And then the lovely little love song, and it's that moment of wanting and desiring and longing after and yearning for someone, and having them turn around and say, "Oh, there you are." It's just, it's heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time, that it took that long to see each other properly. I think it's the fairy tale.
It is, absolutely. But the interesting thing is, so you have this relationship between her and the doctor, Dr. Finkel. What's I can't think of his name.
Finkelstein.
Finkelstein. Thank
Finkelstein.
you, Dr. Finkelstein. And the relationship between the two of them is very. I mean, she's held captive and she is
Aye,
trying to escape, and it is a very negative type
it is.
relationship.
It is.
And then when you turn around at the end of the movie, you do realize that I don't know. I guess he has made another
Aye,
type.
made.
Yeah, another nursemaid. Well, this one
Literally took
seems.
half his own brain and
Mhm.
put it into the new creature, which is
Yes.
rather sad and pathetic, but it sort of fits with a lot of people what they think a relationship should be. That someone should literally be the other half of your brain. They should be everything that you are but feminine, or everything that you are but masculine, or feminine or masculine, depending upon what you like. But point being, I've never understood that need for your significant other to be a mirror, a copy of yourself. To me, that sounds boring. But not to say it's not. Some people, I'm
No.
sure, that fits them beautifully. Um, it's just not easy to find. So the fact that he made her is kind of ironic to me. The first one didn't work because she was her own personality. So
Mhm.
make this one not.
Well, and I think that there is the concept when you think of when you hear phrases like your other half,
Hmm.
you hear those references when you're talking to people in their referencing your spouse being away, or where's
Hmm.
your other half, or how's your other half doing. And I do understand that two wholes or two individuals make a whole type couple, but I think that
Hmm.
there is that whole concept that when you start dealing with couples, they are sharing a singular brain. And I do agree with the
There
I
are
don't
times.
yeah. Well, I think that a lot of that is you get to the point that you start thinking like somebody. You spend so much time
Hmm.
around them. You pick up
Hmm.
and develop habits and little quirks and stuff. Even in friendships, you notice that
Hmm.
after a while, spending time around somebody, all of a sudden you have picked up little isms from somebody that you've been around. And even if you're no longer around them, you're like, oh my gosh, I still do this. And it makes
Aye.
me nuts. But I also think that there's an element of when you are seeking someone to spend time with, and whether it's going to be a relationship as in a romantic relationship, or a relationship as in a friendship, you are
Hmm.
looking for elements that you have in common. Because I mean,
Why?
and it is interesting because it's funny because you talk about the mirror, and you and I pretty much look like our spouse in female form almost.
In a lot of ways. I mean, if people don't know, my husband's a redhead, so
Yeah. Yeah, my
I.
husband has like the big bushy, like dark and streaky white straight beard. It's
Hmm.
like when you see people like you and your husband together, or me and my husband together, they see you, and especially when you realize that, my husband and I are very somewhere between gothabilly, rockabilly, something of that nature. You and your husband are both very vamp-esque and very
Hmm.
gothic, and
Aye.
so you look at it and you're like, oh, it works. It's like,
It
oh, I
does.
see it.
Mhm.
Yes. But it's not something where I created that or you created that.
Mm-mm.
It's something that we saw based off of interests that we had, that we're like,
Aye,
that's the one.
that
Okay.
works. That works. I
Yeah.
have to admit, what first attracted me to my husband was his hair. I saw it in the sunlight. He was wearing black jeans and a white t-shirt and a black leather jacket and got off the back of a motorcycle. It was the
Oh
first
wow.
time I ever saw him.
Oh.
So, aye.
My husband and I were in band camp together. We saw each other in shorts and
I
sweaty
like
and
that.
nasty looking. Yeah, yeah.
That's the best. That's the best. I love it. So, let's see, what are the other ones that we were going to? Oh, one that I thought of, I think
Mhm.
is a bit more tragic and definitely not someone to aspire to, would be, say, Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's
Um,
what couples sort of they tried to be, never really got off the ground. But that's another longing, unrequited sort of love.
um, and that's kind of what I think. It's one of those longings. It's like you feel like you're meant to be together. They are still definitely. I don't know so much that it's unrequited, because I think that they both love each other.
Aye,
They
aye.
just know that they are worlds apart. I guess
Mhm.
where the fairy tale goes wrong, but I mean that definitely is part of that innocence that shapes how Gothic people and people in that culture look at relationships. Um, Someone else, another couple that I would even suggest in looking at is Adam and Eve from uh, uh, Last Lovers Left Alive.
Mm, I've not seen it.
Oh, you need to. You need to watch that. I mean, it's Tom Hiddleston and Tilda Swinton as vampires, and they are both beautiful. Oh my God, they're so beautiful.
Mm,
Um, One of the other things that I wanted to comment about Edward Scissorhands is that you have a relationship, and they are cut off by society, so they are kind of
mm,
in their own world and creating their own world in their own space. And it's only when society steps in and says that's not right that it
mm.
becomes more tragic.
Aye. I have to admit, my wee one, my youngest, is
Hmm.
12, and she's just love her to bits, but this child has got to be the most boy crazy young lady I've ever met in my entire life, and it's only gotten worse as she's gotten older. And we've gone through a lot of the more romantic movies and shows and things, and her reaction to Edward Scissorhands was probably the most adorable thing I've ever seen in my life. She
Aw,
immediately thought he was so precious and just, oh no,
I want to
it's right up
save him.
exactly that. See, and later on we watched The Phantom of the Opera, the one with Gerard Butler,
Oh,
and as we're as we're watching it, uh, she's so horrified by Christine not wanting to go with the Phantom, and I kept staring at her like, "Are you watching the same thing I am?" But all right then, yeah, that's right then. But she was so fascinated by this tragic
sh-
creature.
she wanted Christine to go with him or
I
not?
wanted him to. It's like,
Okay.
love, no, oh no, no. We've watched it since. I mean, that was a bit a few years ago. We've
Yes.
watched this since, and she's got a bit more of a sense of, oh, he's creepy. I'm like, aye, he's creepy. Don't go with that sort, love.
Well, but also, she's also, even at an early age, picking up on things that are, and let's use this as a jumping off point and let's shift into those more toxic style
Mm,
relationships. When you look at the Phantom of the Opera, Eric was in love with Christine, but Christine was not in love with
mm-mm,
him.
no.
She was deceived by him. He hid
Mm-hmm,
himself from her,
mm-hmm.
and he really was just more or less controlling the situation and trying to
Aye.
make her in. I mean, the whole concept of, here you are, and here's this dress, and I'm going to put you in this big giant wedding dress, and we're going to ride down
Mm-hmm,
this underground canal, and I'm going to make you my
aye.
life. I mean, yeah,
Mm,
that's. But there are a lot of toxic, and I see a lot of love stories, fan fiction that are written around Christine and the Phantom, whereas Raoul does not
mm-hmm,
end up as the winner of her love. As a matter of fact, I think the whole second musical that Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote, Love Never Ends, Love Never Dies,
mm.
is written from the perspective that the Phantom ends up with Christine because so many people wanted to see that.
So odd.
And it was a bit more of a redemption arc for him. And then you see that Raoul becomes more of the toxic jerk, possessive, and
Mm-hmm,
everything. So he does this complete shift.
mm-hmm.
But I also think that kind of goes along territory with the whole concept that girls like danger and they like bad boys until they get one, and then they don't want one anymore. But um, one of the ones that makes me absolutely crazy, and the one of the biggest relationships that when I see this one, it kind of makes me want to go, oh, I hope you don't think this is healthy. Is Harley Quinn and the Joker?
Oh, they're fascinating to watch as a
Yes.
story, as something to entertain one, because they're fascinating.
Oh yeah.
Stories don't work if there is not some sort of conflict, if there is not something to watch and nail bite and say what's going to happen next. But they are horrifically toxic. I've never understood someone who looked at that and thought, now that's what I want in life. A horribly abusive. I mean, he's a narcissist and he's controlling and abusive and dismissive. And I mean, the number of times, if you've actually read the comics, he's actually tried to kill Harley Quinn
Oh
and she
no,
keeps
actually
going back.
has.
Oh, yeah, I depends
Uh,
upon which story you're
yeah.
reading, but it's just
Um,
terrifying. No, I love them as characters because they're fun to watch and it's interesting to watch a train wreck, and they are a train wreck.
mhm.
But no, there are quite a few characters like that I see and people idolize, and you think, oh no, sweetie, let me sit and explain that one to you. I think you've missed the point.
Absolutely. I have had people in my life who idealize that relationship,
Mhm.
and they have actually commented that they want a relationship. They want that love that is Joker and Harley. And at some point, you have to sit back and either you have to step away from it or you have to explain to them that that's not healthy. That is
Mm-mm.
not.
That's
And
love.
when you No, that is not love. That is basically he is using her.
Mhm,
She is being held prisoner. And
mhm.
as you said, depending on which version, I know that there was one particular comic that he took her into a room and showed her, like, I think it was like 12 or 13 versions, there's not more, of her body, where he had been killing off other versions of her that didn't work right.
Uh-huh.
And he had been continuing to do this loop. I mean, it's just,
Mm-mm,
there's nothing redeeming, in my opinion, about their
mm-mm,
relationship. And one of the storylines that also threw me when you think about this, she also was highly aware that it wasn't a healthy relationship,
mhm.
because there was a storyline where she was fighting with, I do believe, Black Canary, and commented to Black Canary, because Black Canary was pregnant, and she commented
Oh,
that she was
hi.
pregnant once as well, and she
Mhm.
actually ended up having to
Hide it.
disappear. Yeah, she hid the pregnancy, disappeared, went to, I think, to her sister's house and
Her
had the
sister. Aye.
baby, and then never even
Nope,
told Mr. J that she had the
nope,
baby. So
nope.
she knew that nothing good could come of this
Mhm,
relationship, and that if that child would have been introduced into that, well, fortunately some
mhm.
maternal instinct took over, but it was still kind of a
Ah,
frightening thought. Yeah.
aye. No,
the
that's definitely
other
not.
the other toxic relationship that we all love to hate, and I'm seeing more and more that we love it, is Louis and Lestat.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I can see that as a healthy relationship in any reality. Lestat
Mhm.
is a horror show. He's just an absolute terror. He's the most self-centered, narcissistic, abusive, just he's dreadful. And Louis is just a manic depressive who's
Yeah.
uh, codependent. And then don't even start if you add in Claudia. It just, whoa. Yeah, no, no. Beauty does not necessarily mean that it's a beautiful relationship. There are some
No.
absolutely achingly lovely people to look at. There are complete terrors that you do not want in your life and would literally chew up and spit you out. And in his case, literally. Just, no.
Now that I'm kind of thinking back through the Interview with the Vampire, the books and the series and everything, and did Anne Rice write any sane, normal, straightforward people in those books? All of them had some sort of major
Oh,
issues.
no, they were all a mess as far as I know.
Oh
I,
yeah.
I don't know, the reporter that was interviewed, I mean, there was interviewing Lestat is probably about the most skillful
Daniel,
teacher. Says name Daniel.
I think
Yeah,
so.
uh,
Who at the end, after he had told him this horrible,
mm,
existence and all of these bad things, he says, "I want to be like you."
it's
So
just
maybe not.
so not so
I don't know.
much. No, I'd say everyone in there is damaged beyond repair. I
And
think it's an
Interview with a Vampire is one of those, and I haven't watched the new series. I
neither
have
have I.
actually been watching. I'm getting that close. I'm getting there. It's like I'm having to kind of set myself up to watch it, because, like I said, I was a huge fan of the book. I was a fan of the original movie, so I'm having to kind of set myself up and watch it. And the more, and honestly, the guy who plays Louis, who was Grey Worm
Mhm,
in
mhm.
Game of Thrones, absolutely love him.
Oh, he's
Um,
lovely.
Oh yeah, he's a phenomenal actor. So I'm just gonna have
Mhm,
to bite it and watch it and just kind of go with it. I know a lot of the story themes that are there, so I don't think that they venture too far off. Other than, some of the things that we've kind of talked about earlier is the age difference in Claudia. I do understand why they aged her
mm.
up as much
Aye,
as they
aye.
did, but they also, I think, did pick somebody that was young enough that she could still pull off a young child, because I've seen
Mhm,
clips of her. Um, and I mean, I understand elements of why they made some of the changes that
aye.
they did, but when you sit there and you look at the relationship between Lestat and Louis, you do realize that Lestat picked Louis because Louis was beautiful and
Mhm.
Louis suffering. He's like, I want to fix you. I want to make you better. I know I can fix you and make you better by giving you this gift that's going to amplify what it is that's making you so sad.
But at
And
the same time, another reason why Lestat picked him was because Louis was wealthy.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. So we're going to definitely marry you for the money as well.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
so, he brought him into this lifestyle. He introduced him to things he'd never seen before. And then when Louise starts saying, I don't want to do this anymore, he basically pulls that stunt that so many couples do. It's like, let's have a kid to save the marriage.
Aye,
And they
exactly.
basically Lestat goes, here's your kid. It's like they basically adopted a child.
They
I'm like,
did. Now you
and
can't leave me. We have a baby.
then it gets really, really twisted because basically, the child falls in love, or Louis falls in love. They kind of fall in love
Aye.
with each, which is a kind of a creepy thing in itself. The fact that she's also a child. I mean, when you're
Mm-hmm.
writing this when you're reading it from the perspective, I know they keep referencing that she's a, you know, what was she, 80-year-old woman,
Aye.
but under the
But,
doll-like curls of a 5-year-old.
mm-hmm.
I'm like,
But,
oh god, there's no,
yeah.
there's nothing. Okay,
No.
other than the wardrobe, there is absolutely nothing about
Mm-hmm.
that relationship that we as goths would want
No,
to.
no. No
But
idolizing those boys. No.
no,
Let's
but you
not.
would. But what is so interesting when you think about it is that, as much as that those relationships and those characters should not be idolized, you do have. You grew up in that era
I
when the Anne Rice balls were,
mm-hmm.
her masquerade ball. Oh yeah, everybody wanted to go. They were such a big thing, and if you were in New Orleans in that time frame, it
Hmm.
was a way of life. That vampire way of life actually, I think, was ignited by Anne Rice's.
Oh, very much so. I
Mhm.
would say. I mean, that was part and parcel. Sorry, Eli says, been working on my comic queens. Hope you're all
Oh,
doing well. Oh, I hope that's going well for you, Eli. How exciting.
we look forward to seeing that.
I think the vampire culture is also a huge portion of the goth romantic culture. There's just so much of it. The idea of forever young, of being so passionate about someone that you want to keep them with you forever. That's another part and parcel of the whole romantic, dark, and gothic, and it brings in a lot of the aspects of goth culture, the fascination with death, dying things, eternal life. There's coffins and blood and crosses and all the sort of things, the skulls and the bones and the bats and all of that sort of permeates the goth culture. So I can see why people tend to gravitate towards the vampires and automatically assume that that makes them romantic, that makes them something to aspire to. I think people read into things what they want to when it comes to relationships like that.
Absolutely. Well, and you're talking about vampire culture, and a lot of people look at goth people and they look at people who are in any of those types of cultures, especially vampire vampire goth culture, and think that
Hmm.
these are people obsessed with death. The truth is,
I
no, they're not. It's right the
no.
opposite. You're obsessed more with eternal life. The
Hmm.
concept of being this ancient, all-knowing, powerful being, but still being in a beautiful form. I think that
Hmm.
is more what the obsession is.
Hmm.
And I do agree with you when you start kind of traipsing into all of these different types of gothic events. Of course, a lot of the ones that we see in my area, and you probably get this too, have a tendency to be themed. So
Hmm.
what you'll run into is, like, you'll have like pastel goth night, you'll have goth night,
Aye.
but
Aye.
we so one of the events that we do, it's basically a quarterly event that's hosted at Black Lodge.
Hmm.
I usually MC that, and Lauren will come in and help us with this. But we do. There was a Fae party that was midsummer theme, which was,
Hmm.
oh my god, it was glorious.
I've seen
And then,
pictures.
oh
Beautiful.
oh yeah,
Oh,
we have to get you down here to do
I
this. You have to come
know,
do
I
this.
know, I know.
And the other side of that is also, they do a Halloween ball. They do a Halloween ball, which is Saturday, September or October 18th. Just kind of putting that little bug in your ear, and a bug in your ear. But we have but it's witches and vampire themed. We had discussed kind of
Oh.
switching it out, doing something a little bit different, making it a bit just more creepy themed and Halloween themed in general. But we also realized very early on that it's going to have to be vampires if you're going
Okay.
to want to touch on that that goth culture. Thanks, Huff. That yeah, October 19th. My
October
bad.
19th.
Yes,
Understood.
and he will be,
You noted.
and Brian Huff of Huff Photo will be on site, and he will be doing those amazing photos again.
Mm,
So you have to come. You have to come. We need pictures of you. Okay.
I know.
Um, okay. But if it wasn't for the vampire culture, I don't know how much of the goth culture we would have. I do see some of the dance parties, but they're not as well attended, I would think, as the vampire themed things that I see and that I've been part of.
Well, speaking of vampire, another couple that we need to
Mm,
bring up has got to be Dracula and Mina.
absolutely,
I see
absolutely.
the theme seems to go through all of these couples, all these stories as obsession. Obsession seems to be the main theme. Having someone so desperately in love with you that they're obsessed and all they can think about is you, and you are everything to them, which I can see that being desirous. I can see that being something romantic because it's not something that most people experience in their lives, to have someone so utterly in love with you that they're completely obsessed, which in fairy tales and stories and fantasy sounds absolutely lovely. In reality, tends to
Not
end up
so
with
much.
stalkers. So,
Yes.
not so good after all. But in
And
fantasy,
but the storyline that follows Dracula, I think, is kind of it's a timeless love, and it's
mm,
very tragic. So when you think that Wilhelmina Murray is the spitting image of his deceased wife,
mhm,
that has and I don't know if this line is in the book. It's been a very, very long time, but the movie itself, that one line from the movie, "I've crossed oceans of
mm,
time to find you." I'm sorry.
that's
First of all, Gary
stopped my
Oldman
heart.
said, yeah, Gary Oldman said that he played that part just so he could say that line. And I'm like, if anybody were, I'm like, I probably would pass out if somebody were to
Mm,
say that to me.
oh,
I'd be
hi.
like, I mean, that is pretty much a show-stopping panty dropper line right there.
Mm,
I mean,
okay.
that's amazing. But
Mhm.
when you think about it, but that is a little different story. Um, but that obsession, that story of obsession does seem to follow through, and I think that's something that a lot of people, I think that elder goths like ourselves understand that extreme obsession and that desire to completely possess and control somebody is not healthy. I think it's when you
Aye.
start dealing with your baby bats and you start um, talking to
Yes.
them that you have to kind of stop and go, it sounds beautiful on paper. That is not how that really works, though.
Mm-mm.
It sounds beautiful that some guy's standing outside your window and yelling your name and throwing rocks at your window. I'm like, but you're also forgetting, 150 text messages during the course of a day and
Aye.
constantly calling and checking up on you. Where are you? Where are you? Um,
Mhm.
okay, so yeah, I'm going to step over into this one because I do think that there are elements that cross all lines, but they seem to be very, very prominent with Twilight. I am not a fan of Twilight. I know that
Likewise.
there are a lot of people who are. My oldest daughter grew up in that era. She loved them. She actually read Midnight Sun as well, but there are so many issues when you start talking about Twilight that can be used to actually discuss what is not a healthy relationship. Um,
Mhm.
so when you do have a baby bat, and they are, really big into these vampire novels and werewolf novels and any type of like demons, angels, all of them have
Aye.
that same overlapping. You belong to me. You're now part of our group. I'm going to alienate you from the rest of your family, the rest of
Yes.
your world. It's a good way to start talking about different things, such as gaslighting,
Mm.
such as
Oh,
controlling and not giving up yourself to be with somebody. And I think that that was probably the best thing that I was able to take out. The Cabana Boy and I were able to take out of those books and to share is that that's not a healthy relationship.
Aye.
And even though she was the one who was obsessed with him, it still was not. She was willing to do things extremely dangerous to get his attention, even potentially die.
Aye.
Yeah, and I just think that a lot of times when you're looking at what is romanticized about those type of relationships and those characters, you need to really read deeper into it and determine if it is a toxic relationship and what makes it toxic. Because there are healthier versions of those relationships.
We go back to Gomez and Morticia. They are obsessed
Absolutely.
with each other, utterly obsessed, utterly desirous of each other, utterly
I don't,
focused on each other, but they're not toxic. They're not controlling.
no.
They're not demanding. They are ultimately giving of each other to each other, and they're committed to each other, and they're equals in all things.
And truthfully, that is the way that they view their family. That's the way they view the relationship. It is basically, and I see this also with the Munsters as well. Not as extreme as the Addams family because I think that the Munsters you do get the outside world gets involved a little bit too much sometimes. But the one thing that I do see about those type of relationships that we saw early on with the quote weirdos the strange families were that it was them against the world, and they were always supportive of each other and trying to make sure that they were comfortable with every situation, and also just that they knew that they were loved.
Aye. They had the same perspective on the world. Each of them both looked at things and said, this is our family, and it's the most important thing in creation to us, and we will always
Absolutely.
protect them. And they both agreed, yes, yes, this is what we want from our lives. And I think that helps. You have to have the same perspective. You and your mate, whoever you are, have to have the same perspective on the world. And this is not to say that you can't disagree and you can't have moments where, no, that's not quite what I think of things. But in the end, you have to always be committed to each other. And part of, to me, what love, healthy love, is a desperate desire to see this other person happy. If you
Yes.
both feel that way about each other, then I don't think things will go wrong.
Well, it's not just happy, but it's also to see them
Healthy,
succeed and uplift them and
happy
to
and
see.
healthy.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of times when people start talking about what is missing from their relationship, a lot of times it is the support that both of you it's give and take, and it is where you are supporting your significant other as much as they are supporting you.
Aye.
And the one thing also that doesn't always look exactly like you think it does because there are people have different love languages and sometimes
Aye.
you have to
Aye.
understand what those love languages are, and if you are a person that physical touch is your love language and you're married to somebody who physical touch absolutely is not their love language, that's when you have to figure out how to work through those
How to
things.
communicate. How to communicate.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that I really want to see going forward, because I know that we're getting ready to see the second season of Wednesday, um, and I think that we're getting to the top of the hour, and I think that it's getting pretty
Aye.
close to kind of cutting this off. But um, one of the things that they did wrong, in my opinion, with the new Wednesday series is that they pretty much put the family at odds with each other.
I
Uh,
didn't like that. That seems anti everything that is the Adams family. That if all else fails, they have each other, and they're always, even if they don't always understand each other, they're always in sync with each other. I love Louise Guzman. I think he did such a beautiful job as Gomez. That was
oh,
lovely. But I hated the relationship between
yes.
Morticia and Wednesday. To me, that felt like
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
ugly and awful. And I thought, no, I don't like this at all. Not at all. I understand that a girl has to has to grow up, has to change, has to move away from her mum. I get that, I do, but it just felt forced and nasty, and just, no, I didn't like it. Disrespectful.
Well,
Didn't like that.
I agree. I agree. But one of the things that you will run into with the daughter, um, I had two. I had two. Um, at some point, they hit an age that they don't want anything to do with you. Somebody told me at one point that when her daughter was 18 years old, she's like, if I were on fire, she wouldn't have spit on me to put it out. And she'd just step over me and keep on going. And there are days that is absolutely true. I love both of my daughters, and I know that those relationships kind of circle back around, and you become better.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of step out of the role of almost being mom and become more of
Right.
a friendly
Mm-hmm.
type relationship. But you know, I I did not like the way that they did it with Morticia and Wednesday, because I think that it was a little bit extreme. And like you said, it
Mm-hmm.
was very nasty.
It didn't seem necessary to go the way that they did. I understood what they were trying to do. I just didn't like
Mhm.
the way they did it. I think it felt unnecessary.
The thing with that is, I think a lot of times when you have a daughter that is pulling away, mom becomes needy. They're like, no, 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 let me fix it. Let me help. Let me help.
Mm-hmm.
Let me help. I think
Right.
that in that type of relationship, Morticia would have been trying to um, be the bridge to kind of
Mm-hmm.
fill that gap and make it. It's like, oh, you can always come back. And Morticia and Wednesday would have been going, leave me alone, leave me
I
alone, you
see.
know.
I didn't see Morticia as the sort that would be clingy, though. As you say, I think she'd be more the one that would step back and say, well, I'm here when you need me. I'll
True.
keep you safe from afar, but I'll be here when you need me. I don't see her as the sort that would cling and claw at the relationship, trying to make it what it was. She seems like the sort of woman who's has her own agency and would
Mhm.
know that, of course, her daughter's going to have her own agency as well. No matter
True.
how heartrending it is to see her, it's also uplifting to watch them become their own women. So I don't know, I just felt it didn't feel like Morticia to me. This
But
personal opinion.
as, as a mother who's not very maternal, I guess that's a good way to put it. Um, I have my maternal moments, but I am not the most lovey, touchy feely person in the world. The more my daughters backed away, the more I come back, come
Aw.
back, and it's I.
Mm,
The more that they were there, and I realized that they were there, and I was part of their lives, and there was that definite need. You were a little bit, you are a little bit your own person, and I don't want to say you have your own agency. I think that's a great way of putting it. But as they start stepping away, but also that is starting to realize that your daughters are growing up
aye.
and they are getting ready to move on and move
And
out.
that's always going to be painful. It's lovely to
Absolutely.
watch and painful at the same time. So
Abs-
it's we literally birthed these creatures, so I
yeah.
understand.
Oh yeah. The relationship that I absolutely, and I will be honest with you, I was really happy to see that every time she had an issue with mom, she would go to dad, because that seems to be
At least
very, yeah.
at least there's some sort of back and forth with the parents, which I like that, because I thought Louis Guzman was fabulous as
I did
Gomez.
too.
I really loved him.
I loved him, and I loved Fester. I thought Fester was amazing. He was
It was
great.
fun. I liked him as well. I liked it as well.
The one thing that I really did not care for at all was the relationship between Morticia and Gomez. I think that they did not have each other's
I,
backs.
I felt odd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they felt like they were at odds. And I know that
Hmm.
family can get the best of you, but I still think, um,
It doesn't feel like my
yeah.
Morticia and Gomez. I understand. They're my. I'll keep them in the perfect fantasy couple.
So I understand we actually have some pictures of your mom since you
Oh,
were.
I says my mum
Wait,
as Gidget. So
um,
I there
oh
we
my
are.
God,
Don't
she
say she's not Gidget.
is
There's my mum,
now.
the flying nun.
Is she, is she, is she a redhead also?
No, no, her hair is jet black. It's
Oh,
about
okay,
as
okay.
black as it can possibly be.
Oh
So
wow.
I.
Because that first picture, honestly, I could see you in it. It's like I could totally see you.
I've got the eyebrows. We have some magical eyebrows in my family.
Ours go away. And then when you cosplay and you start cosplaying people like Lily, you end up shaving them, and it's finally starting to come back in. So
I've never had to worry about not having eyebrows. Mine are taking over the world if I'm not careful. So.
So I believe that we are officially at the top of the hour.
We are.
That went pretty quickly, and I really feel like we almost need a part 2 to this one.
There's so many other couples we could bring in that we didn't talk about, and some maybe not the best ones to bring up, but interesting to discuss.
Well, I mean, when you think about, you have relationships such as Tiffany and Chucky, you have Eric Draven and Shelly Webster. There are a lot of these couples that they are almost idealized that might not need to be. So, I mean, maybe, we did spend a lot of time talking about the good and the things about the Munsters and the Addams family that we like. Maybe we should shift and talk about why we should not idolize these type of relationships always.
Agreed. That sounds like a plan.
All righty. All right. And with that said, I'm going to say pleasant screams. And we will see you later.